Africa. From colonial exploitation to contemporary awakening. Africa, a continent rich in culture, history, and resources, has experienced a tumultuous journey from colonial subjugation to contemporary struggles for autonomy and prosperity. The legacy of colonialism continues to impact the socio-economic and political landscape of many African nations. Recent developments, such as the political upheaval in Burkina Faso, underscore a broader continental movement toward rejecting exploitation and seeking self-determination. This essay explores Africa's historical trajectory from colonization to the present, emphasizing the economic and political dynamics with former colonial powers, particularly France, and the potential shift toward new economic paradigms, including the adoption of independent currencies and alignment with the BRICS nations. Historical background. Colonial era. The scramble for Africa in the late 19th century saw European powers, notably Britain, France, Belgium, and Germany, partitioning the continent for economic exploitation and strategic advantage. France, in particular, established a significant colonial presence in West and Central Africa, where it imposed its culture, language, and economic systems on the local populations. The colonial period was marked by the extraction of raw materials, forced labor, and the suppression of indigenous political structures. Post-colonial struggles. The mid-20th century decolonization wave brought nominal independence to African nations. However, the legacy of colonialism persisted through neo-colonial practices, where former colonial powers, especially France, maintained significant influence over their former colonies' economic and political affairs. This was evident in the continued use of the CFA franc, a currency controlled by the French treasury, which many argue hampers the economic sovereignty of West and Central African countries. Contemporary movements for autonomy. The case of Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's recent political revolutions illustrate a growing continental discontent with neo-colonial structures. In 2014, a popular uprising ousted longtime President Blaise Compaoré, who had been in power since a French-supported coup in 1987. The movement was driven by widespread frustration over economic stagnation, corruption, and the continued influence of former colonial powers. The subsequent instability and the rise of a transitional government highlighted the people's desire for genuine self-determination and economic independence. Rejection of French influence. France's continued military and economic presence in Africa is increasingly being challenged. Many African leaders and civil society groups argue that French policies are designed to benefit France at the expense of African development. The exploitation of resources, unfavorable trade terms, and military interventions are cited as evidence of ongoing neocolonialism. The sentiment that France without Africa means total bankruptcy reflects the deep interdependence between French economic stability and its African connections. Economic sovereignty and the future. The CFA franc and currency independence. One of the most contentious issues in Franco-African relations is the CFA franc. Critics argue that the CFA franc zone, which ties the currencies of 14 African countries to the euro and mandates the deposit of foreign exchange reserves with the French treasury, undermines economic sovereignty. Proponents of currency independence suggest that adopting national currencies or a regional currency, potentially aligned with the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, could foster greater economic autonomy and development. BRICS and new economic alliances. The BRICS nations represent a potential alternative to traditional Western-dominated economic systems. By aligning with BRICS, African countries could benefit from diversified trade partnerships, investment opportunities, and technological exchanges. The idea of a BRICS currency or a new regional currency could reduce dependency on the CFA franc and provide more control over monetary policy. This shift could help African nations better manage their economies, foster industrialization, and reduce the exploitation of their resources by foreign powers. Conclusion. Africa's journey from colonial exploitation to contemporary efforts for autonomy is marked by resilience and a growing determination to break free from the vestiges of colonialism. The recent political upheavals, such as in Burkina Faso, and the increasing rejection of French influence, underscore a broader continental movement towards self-determination and economic independence. By exploring new economic alliances and adopting independent currencies, African nations have the potential to chart a path toward genuine sovereignty and sustainable development. As Africa awakens, the vision of a continent free from exploitation and empowered to shape its destiny becomes ever more attainable.